That's brilliant. Thanks very much, Yasmin. I've just hit the record button there. Well, first of all, I'd like to add my welcome to Yasmin's. And I have to actually just say that it's an incredible privilege to be hosting this event. And it's a great testimony to, I think, the strength and ambition of the SME and the Asian business sector, that there's so many people here. I mean, I look at this sign here now, we're over 80 participants. And I have to say that also when we put the message out, it's also about how many people shared that and actually passed it around. And that's a real sense of the sense of collective worth that people have for each other and for the business community. So I really appreciate it. And I'm really delighted that you've taken time out to be here. I also am incredibly pleased that we've got the panelists that we have. And I think it's a great testimony to their desire to communicate and connect with you as the audience that is really powerful. I mean, as soon as I sort of said this is something that we wanted to do, the uptake and response was instant. I mean, and it's been, I think, quite an unusual thing, because very often people don't see that side of either the corporate world or senior leadership. So it's really powerful to see that. I wanted to just start with a presentation which sort of tries to map out the context and really sort of sets the scene for this discussion. And really, I hope to help make this something that is going to be a really powerful, meaningful turning point, not only for your businesses and the plans that you have in business, but also for how the civic authorities, how regional authorities, how other organizations and big business interact with not only your audience, but this sector as a whole. So if that's okay, I'm going to just share my screen. I've been giving myself about 10 minutes for this, so I hope to try and stay to time. So essentially, we've got a strap line under there towards collective success, and that's ultimately what we're trying to do. And what I thought I would do is start this with the journey that I've been on through Yemi Architects, because I think this is really, I think it's quite illustrative of the issue, the problem, and the opportunity. So Yemi started in 2012 with my business partner, Sweli Khan, who I hope is on this call. And we started in this tiny little room in this office in the Gumption Centre. And it was so small that if one of us wanted to leave the office, the other had to move the chair in so you could get past. So it was really, really small. And that was 2012, and we were doing house extensions. We then started getting approached by Asian businesses, and suddenly we found a world of people who wanted to do really ambitious things. We'd come out with way out designs, and suddenly, instead of knocking it back, they'd go with it. And so we began to start getting into a different sort of business, inadvertently, but we began to see what was happening within that sector and community, and began to get a sense of the ambition that there was there. And then I met Kirsten, and so this was a turning point, because what happened was that when Kirsten sort of engaged me in what was happening within the city, that started introducing the city to me in a completely different way. I'm born in Bradford, I've lived here all my life. Yet now I was looking at the city in terms of what the aspirations were and what the challenges were, and then how can I adjust the business to start meeting those? And that started taking me into a way of my outlook on what my role within the city was began to change, and I began to feel quite empowered. That's something that we then started doing within our projects, and that then helped us to establish really a new type of work that we were doing. So that led to a situation where I ended up joining the LET board. Now, I think there's a lot of people I meet who've never heard of the LET, and yet this organization is involved in such an incredible ambition for the area and has delivered such incredible things. Roger Marsh, who's on the call here today in the panel, will no doubt touch on this, but it actually opened my eyes to what the real ambitions were. And suddenly I began to come back to my office and see things in a very different way. And it made me then look at the opportunities in a very different way. So that then led to the launch of Yemi Tech during the pandemic. And this was due to one of my colleagues, Alejandro, getting a scholarship to study data science and urban data science. And instead of saying, okay, well, thank you very much and good luck, I was now in tune enough to say, why don't you stay on what can we do together. And we've now launched this business where we've got 5 councils that we're in discussions with. We've got an NHS trust that we're investing. We've got multi-million-pound offer of investment, and we've also got various partnership opportunities with the likes of IBM and others. So for me, as I see it, that contextual journey from being insular to visionary in around that time came out of that contextual awareness. Now, I must caveat here, this might look like I did this myself, but actually there's a whole team. I've got an incredible team, and I've got to give credit to them, because I couldn't have done this without them. And that them buying into this journey is really what has helped us get to where we are. So that's the context of my journey. So how does that context, how can that be made relevant to you? Not everybody here is from Bradford or is from this region even, but these parameters and these situations exist everywhere. So in Bradford, we're looking at the Southern Gateway Master Plan, which is really part of this high-speed rail link between Manchester and Leeds. That puts Manchester from Bradford 19 minutes away, Leeds 6 minutes away. Now, the question then arises is, well, what does that do to the city? What happens as a result of that? We then look at things like NEC coming to Bradford at Bradford Live. And suddenly, you've got the biggest arena operator coming to the Bradford City Centre. This is going to bring in approximately 270,000 people a year into the city centre. Now, what are the implications of that for you as business owners, as investors, as developers? What's the site next door doing? What's the site opposite doing? What are the opportunities on the back of that thing happening? We've got the success of getting Channel 4 coming to Leeds, and Roger and Kirsten had a really big part to play in that, along with various other people. But it's the fact that winning them so that they chose Leeds is a really powerful thing. And it's again, so what can we get as a result of that? What are the opportunities that came out? What happened with all the other production companies that have turned up on the back of Channel 4 coming, and so on? So it's about having that understanding. Just in the last budget, the National Infrastructure Bank, the first of its kind, has been announced, and it's coming to Leeds. And I'm going to hopefully hear from Roger as to, well, what does that mean? What does that involve? And how might people who are in business and starting businesses think about these things? We've then got devolution coming. Now, this is a £1.8 billion deal, which essentially is with an elected mayor. And with that amount of money being invested in here, in this region, with essentially through a mayoral authority, well then, what are the opportunities for people here who are in business, who have got the opportunity to do things and are planning to do things? And we've got things like One City Park coming to Bradford, and these kinds of office developments, which again are big statements and big investments in the city. And it's a case of how do we fit in with that? And I think the question that I'd like to leave you with at this stage is really, how do you plan to benefit from this? And it's that sort of awareness of what's going on around you that starts the seeds around what happens. But it doesn't just stop at this. There's more factors that actually, I think, really, really are relevant to not just the SME sector as a whole, but the Asian business sector in particular. So these are things like sustainability. So things that are local, ethical, natural. Well, actually, a lot of what the SME sector is doing fits with this perfectly. We then have technology. Suddenly, the entry barriers are much lower than they've ever been before. So suddenly, if somebody wants to get into the food business, well, really all you need is a menu and a week's rent. You can go into a cloud kitchen. You've got people who can go into Amazon fulfillment centers, where essentially you could get into an e-commerce business where you don't have to buy the stock, you don't have to store it, you don't have to do all the logistics for it, but you can be in that business. So it's providing opportunities suddenly that weren't there before. And this is how it's so important for us to have that understanding that it's there. Funding, I mean, this is, I actually can't grasp how much money is sloshing around the system at the moment. Apparently, I'm told that there's about $1.4 trillion in the property sector globally. Yet the property sector is so dysfunctional at the moment that all those investors are looking for other places to put their money. One of the people that are in the call here today, Furkan from Kpmg, has just achieved £80 million investment because he's got a business that does end-to-end smart tech solutions, presents them to councils. It costs the council nothing. They make a saving, and he ends up with the savings, making money out of the savings. So everybody wins. So how does that funding create an opportunity that you wouldn't ordinarily get? And I think that a lot of the work that the support systems that are out there are about how to connect into and get signposted to these things. We've then got Brexit. And whatever your views were on Brexit, the fact is that when you've got a large Asian community, which has very strong links to their ancestral homelands, this becomes really, really powerful. Because when we look at things like the government's export finance guarantee scheme, I mean, we've got one of the people from Department of International Trade is on the call here today, Jawad, who leads on their smart city stuff, and we've been doing some really interesting stuff together. When you look at this deal, it essentially means that if I got a contract in Pakistan for £10 million, I get paid by the British government in full, and my client pays back the government over a long period of time on very favorable terms. Now, when we suddenly start thinking about our connections into places like Pakistan and India, well, then it becomes really interesting. We've got people on the call like Amjad Pervez, who runs Lift Pakistan. They work with a whole series of tech entrepreneurs in Pakistan who desperately need investment. But it actually is something that can then be exported and used globally. So actually, how does British businesses and British people get involved in that? We've got Sharon Jandu from YABA, Yorkshire Asian Business Association, with incredible links with India and delegations that come over. So some of the connections that this sector has in a post-Brexit environment. I mean, sorry, I'm going on a bit now, but also I just mentioned Turkey as well, because there's a free trade deal done with Turkey. Jawad has been showing me some of the opportunities in Turkey, which suddenly we can tap into these. These are incredible opportunities. And then we've got ESG, which essentially stands for environmental, social, corporate governance. Basically, it means organizations, big businesses doing the right thing. And doing the right thing essentially can mean helping out in disadvantaged places, helping out people that are disconnected, helping out people that are marginalized and isolated. So when I look at all of these things, well, actually, our SME community and our business community, actually, it starts to look like it's in a really, really strong position. So if we take this one step further and we start picking out a few names, and I've just picked these out from people that I know, and there's lots more like this. But essentially, these group of professional services companies have got over 10,000 clients between them. So when you think, well, there's just 6 people can lead to 10,000. So if these 6 people were in a position of presenting their proposition to big business, to organizations such as the LEP and to others, well, suddenly there's actually quite a formidable proposition there. And when we then look at that for trading businesses, we've got companies like ITC who have got, literally, a very high number of clients, but they're all very small Asian, not all of them, but some of them are very small Asian businesses. How might being, them uplifting through the likes of what ITC is doing, what Adams are doing with, they supply so many of the takeaways around the country. How can they be engaged around some of these things to create outcomes that will uplift the outcomes out on the street? Regal Foods PLC, there's not many Asian businesses that have made it to PLC status. Again, here on the call, really engaged, really helping, really wanting to be part of this solution. And so we're looking at just 12 people leading to over 35,000 as an estimate of that connection. And that begins to demonstrate the capacity of this audience, this group, and this sector as a whole. So to kind of round off, I want us to just think about our strengths. We're incredibly well connected. We're connected, we've got our interdependencies, we've got our supply chains, we've got our communities, we've got the ability to really be able to get through to a lot of people. We're very ambitious. I think, there's no, I come across people that all I see is ambition and ambition and ambition. And I think that that's something that is a really powerful characteristic that we should be really trying to harness. And then I think resilience, I think that through the COVID pandemic, so many of the hospitality businesses, Milo Hawes and others, were doing so much in the community, even though they were actually struggling themselves at that time. They were having their own challenges. So what I really feel is that we've got a very strong foundation. We've got a real platform to engage. And what I would like us to do is to go into this session really from that position of strength. And from that position of being able to say, we can really go on to do some really great things collectively. There's just one final thing that I would like to touch on. I know that some people can't stay to the end, so I just want to mention now, I will come back to this, but we are going to run a coaching program, which is really aiming at taking a small group of businesses through the sort of process that I've kind of outlined here, of that sort of awareness, those introductions, that repositioning and that visioning. I'll come on to this at the end again, but if anybody is interested in this and has to leave before the end, please just drop me an email. Hopefully everybody's got my email from the invite, but I would like to follow on with that at the end. So that pretty much is my piece. I'm sorry I didn't time that, but I hope I wasn't too long. And now what I would like to do is start the process where we can actually speak to our audience, to our panelists. So what I would like to do first of all is ask I'd like to introduce Liz Barber to you. Liz is the CEO of Yorkshire Water, is a partner at Ernst & Young, was a partner at Ernst & Young, advising some of the biggest companies in the world, and is also on the board of the Council of Leeds University, and is Deputy Pro-Chancellor there. And I just add that, when I first spoke to Liz about this, there was literally no hesitation. It was straight in, and yeah, I'm up for it. And I was delighted that an organisation the size of Yorkshire Water, actually the chief exec is here herself today, so that's brilliant. So Liz, thank you very much, and over to you.
Thank you, Amir. My pleasure. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Amir's given me sort of 5 minutes, because I think it'd be helpful if I just explained a little bit about what Yorkshire Water does. And many of you will know, you turn the tap on and out comes the water, and you throw your water down the sink or the loo, and it comes to us and we deal with it. So we take from the environment 1.6 billion litres of water every day, treat it, get it to you in your businesses. And then when it comes out the other side, we collect that, treat it. You may be interested in knowing that very shortly, when we commission our anaerobic digestion plant in Huddersfield, that all of Yorkshire's poo is converted into electricity. I'm very proud of that. Not everybody would be, but I am. We serve 5 million people in Yorkshire, 2.3 million homes, 120,000 businesses, and we are, and this is a surprise to many people, Yorkshire's second biggest landowner, that we own 70,000 acres of Yorkshire. Our average bill for those services is £370 a year. We collect £1 billion, and most interesting, I think, for the people on this call, is that we spend £350 million a year in our operational budgets, and usually on average about 400 million in our capital budgets. Now, a little bit more about how we do that. To do that, we have 150 reservoirs, 50 water treatment works. We have got 640 wastewater treatment works, and our pipes would go around the world more than twice. We've got 86,000 kilometres of pipes. And yes, Yorkshire is big enough to get all that in it. So the challenge for us is that we have done a lot of thinking about what Yorkshire Water is here to do. Apart from the obvious, like deliver service, we have thought very deeply about the role that we need to play. And we have come up with a vision, a purpose really statement of play water's role in making Yorkshire a great place to be now and always. That does 3 things: operate all that stuff really well, really efficiently to keep bills down, and deploy technology to do that. A little bit more about that in a moment. The second thing about that is that we're facing climate change. So we have to be responsible about our carbon emissions, and historically that they've been high. So we have a net zero target for 2030, and we get there. I'll talk about a little bit more about that. It might be of interest to you. And then the third thing is this kind of, we're very, very, very mindful that we're an institution here across Yorkshire, and the way we run our business needs to be done in a way that not only delivers that service and that long-term resilience, but actually gives the best deal for Yorkshire. So we do that in the best way to serve the communities and the economy and the environment here in Yorkshire, because we're known as an anchor institution. We're a kind of permanent institution, a significant part of the economy, 1 to 2%. And, you know, we need to play our part in that really, really well. So we employ 4,000 people plus 2,000 indirectly, and we have about 5,000 to 10,000 suppliers, depending on where we are with our 5-year cycle. So we are, the challenges for us is that getting to net zero, we need technology to help us get there. We need to serve customers really well, and we're using a lot of data analysis. We're using a lot of SMEs to analyze that data. So we need small teams with really creative thinking. And we can run analytics on voice data and input to see about customer emotion. When you think about all those pipes and pumps we've got around the network, we need to be really good at predicting where that's going to go wrong. So there's colossal amounts of data that we need to get through to make sure we're really on it. We've got 40,000 loggers listening for leaks, and we need to collect that data and work out how is the best way that we deploy people to get after those leaks. We've got big innovation program coming, and of course the technology around net zero. It's great that we do what we do with Yorkshire's poo, but we've got a long way to go to get to net zero, and we need to think about electric vehicles, charging stations, various other things. And last but not least, and Kirsten will be aware of this, our wastewater treatment works in Bradford at Esholt. We're looking to develop, and no doubt that will be a great opportunity to involve SMEs in that site. We're developing it into a sustainable sort of economy hub where, you know, businesses can come and work and participate. So hopefully I've given you a good flavour of what Yorkshire Water does and what we're looking for.
That's brilliant. Thank you really. Thank you very much, Liz, for that kind of really concise overview. I think for a lot of the audience here, I think it's really about them being able to see how they fit into what's going on in this context. And I guess the crux of the question comes down to, how do you think that they can fit in with some of the plans, and why might small SMEs or the Asian business community, why might they be even relevant to what you're doing and what your vision is?
Well, any business is relevant. So any and every business is relevant to what we do, so long as it supports our purpose, what we're here for. And actually, as part of that, being an anchor institution, we are really driving this hard now and looking at how we interact with local SMEs, and in particular, the diversity of those SMEs. So we're going through a big, and in fact, the way Bradford and Leeds councils procure in this way, we're taking their lead in the way we apply our procurement policies. So at the moment, we're doing a big baselining work to look at the representation of our local community SMEs in our supply chain. And we want to target that we have got fair representation. So we're on with that at the moment. We want to make it accessible for people to apply to come and work with us. So that's being worked on at the moment, because we know there's some great talent out there and we're not tapping into it. We're not doing this right. So that accessibility is very important. And then maybe when we are letting those big contracts, the big capital contracts, we are going to begin to stipulate that they employ local skills and local SMEs to deliver their services. So stay in touch, because we're going to be doing some exciting things.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. That's really encouraging. Okay, so we'll move on, and I was now going to introduce Maz Ahmed. Maz is the operations director at Morrison's, and he's also a non-exec director at Bradford Teaching Hospitals. And I don't think you know this, Maz, but I think at the time you were appointed, I also applied, but I didn't get it. So I think you were chosen over me. So well done. And I also note that you're a cricket fan. So I know that there's a few people in the audience who are cricket fans, so that might crop up somewhere in the questions. But please, do you want to say a few words about your role with Morrison's?
Yeah, thanks, Amir, and afternoon, everyone. Amir, I wouldn't feel too hard done by on that role, because it might not have been the one, because I actually am a non-executive of Bradford District Care NHS.
Okay.
Foundation. So yeah, look, if I sort of touch on a few things, really, I thought I'd start with a bit of my personal background, because I think there's a few pertinent points that might resonate with the audience today. And the first thing I'd say is I'm a British Muslim of Pakistani heritage. I was 5 years old when I came to this country, and when you were talking earlier on, Amir, about resilience, hard work, and I guess the importance of education, that really resonated with me quite a lot. I spent my childhood in a place called Stoke-on-Trent, sandwiched between Birmingham and Manchester, and all of those values really came to the fore. Bradford's an adopted home, and a bit like Liz and Roger, actually, we've got something in common. I went to the University of Leeds, did accounting and finance, and look, I stayed in Yorkshire. I married a girl from Yorkshire, and we've got 3 young children, and we're sort of living in Bradford. So pretty invested in Bradford and Yorkshire, and I work for a business that a lot of you will know in Morrison's, a business that has got deep-rooted heritage in Bradford and Yorkshire, remembering that William Morrison, in all those years ago, started the business from a market stall in Bradford. And I'll sort of touch on kind of the role of Morrison's in a moment, but if I just talk a little bit about my role in the business. So I'm a qualified chartered accountant, and I've been in the business 13 years. And look, I've done a range of roles in finance. Most recently, I was finance director in the fresh and trading and manufacturing business for Morrison's. So quite a scale business, 10,000 colleagues, £2 billion worth of turnover. And last year, right at the start of the pandemic, I had a bit of a baptism of fire. I moved across to become operations director in our manufacturing business, which has got a whole host of different commodities that we manufacture. And it's a bit of a best kept secret, really. Not a lot of people, we don't publicly do enough, I think, of outlining the role that food manufacturing plays within Morrison's. Morrison's, at its heart, is a food maker and shopkeeper. And our manufacturing business, which has got 20 sites up and down the country, of which there's 3 sites within Bradford, is a huge part of that business, really integrating our supply chain with our retail business. And so, yeah, I'm an operations director in that business. And I guess one of the things that we as a business look at is automation as an opportunity and innovation within that. The cost of labor is increasing. We all know that. Living wage is putting pressure on some of those costs, and therefore automation becomes more and more important, as does innovation. And you sort of look at food manufacturing and food, and the opportunity around innovation is huge. And our division, the manufacturing division, is really focused quite heavily around those 2 words, really, automation and innovation, looking for opportunities to do things differently. Because look, British retail, UK grocery is pretty competitive, right? We're fighting on several fronts, really, in terms of price, quality, provenance, and driving really hard to make sure we win the customer's pound. And in doing that, we have to find different ways of doing things. And we have to work with businesses that can show us new things, new technologies, new innovation, not too dissimilar from what Liz said. And so, yeah, look, that's my role really in manufacturing. Morrisons, and then alongside that, as a non-executive, Bradford District Care NHS Trust. Again, a trust that sort of does some brilliant work on mental health and learning disabilities across the Bradford district. Again, an organisation that's looking more and more for opportunities. We all know the NHS and the strain around financial pressure and financial sustainability and the importance of that to organisations like the NHS. Looking for new opportunities, new ways of doing things, looking at, and the pandemic taught us that a lot, looking at opportunities to really challenge ourselves in terms of how we deliver services for service users, how we engage with colleagues. You know, the very fact that we're having this as a Zoom call, there might have been a time when we were all trying to get into a room. And so even a microcosm like that is changing the way we deliver services in the trust. And it's really exciting to be part of an organisation that, on the one hand, Morrisons, a big corporate, a huge role to play in the Bradford and Yorkshire ecosystem, and then a public organisation like Bradford District Care Trust. And it's really exciting, Amir, to be part of the panel today and part of the journey that you are hopefully starting today with the audience, because one of the pieces of work I do for Morrisons is I'm a diversity sponsor for the BAME diversity work that the business wants to do. And frankly, we're a bit behind on that. We need to do more. If you look at our presence in Bradford and you look at our leadership profile, there's a lot more for us to do. And we recognise that. And part of the reason why I wanted to be on in this session, not only to engage with SME businesses, but also to work with BAME organisations that can work with a business like Morrisons to help us improve some of that diversity. So that's all I was going to say on that bit, Amir. Thank you.
Brilliant. That's really interesting. And I think, you touch on some really pertinent points there that I think, are really at the crux of it. And there's a long history behind, I think, the relationship between, I think, the diverse communities within this region and places like it across the UK. And I think that really it is about having a very frank, open discussion and really look at how we can try and take that forward. There's been some questions coming in which I think look really, really fantastic and touch on some really serious, practical points. And I think that's part of what this has got to be. It can't just be about a nice sounding, woolly sort of thing. It's got to lead to the kind of changes that we want to see. So talking of change, I think that one of the things that I wanted to sort of ask you was that, given what you've said about, Bradford, the Morrisons being headquartered in Bradford, for the businesses and the business community that are in Bradford and have got ambitions, have got things, how can they get into Morrisons? How can Morrisons' presence in Bradford, how might that be relevant, or how might that make a difference to here?
Yeah, well, look, I think big corporates are a bit guilty of not being accessible, just being frank, right? If someone wanted to get into Morrisons as a small SME, they'd ring our head office, they'd ask to be put through to, say, the confectionery buyer. And the reality is, unless they knew a name or a contact, they ain't getting in. Right, and it's just the way it is. And so I wanted to touch on a couple of things that might help and share that with the audience. Before I do that, I just thought I'd not sort of wax lyrical about Morrisons and turn this into a marketing opportunity, but just to put a bit of context around the contribution Morrisons makes to Bradford and the Yorkshire region. If you look at that in the context of the economy, we put £0.5 billion of payments either to colleagues, suppliers, capital investment and rates into Bradford. We use our cafes and stores for local community groups. They're accessible, and we're a local business, right? We are a Bradford business, but we're also a business that recognises that we have a big role to play in these local communities. We employ 5,000 people in Bradford, and we were the first supermarket only a few weeks ago to announce that we were going to pay colleagues £10 an hour living wage. And I think all of that's very important in the context of a broader economic picture for Bradford, Yorkshire and the UK for organisations like Morrisons, big organisations. I wanted to touch on 2 points to sort of answer your question really. And as I say, we've got a big focus on supporting local communities and supporting local economies. And in that context, in 2017, we launched something called our Local Food Makers Programme, which is working with local suppliers to source more and more local food. You touched on it in your presentation. That's really relevant to customers right now. It really resonates, and we recognise that in 2017. And to date, we've worked with 153 suppliers that have worked with Morrisons, including 35 here in Bradford, that have showcased and had the ability to showcase their provenance, their quality, and really benefit from an organisation like Morrisons. And there's some great examples, right? I've got Punjaban Indian cooking sauces that were identified through a event that we did in St. Ives. So granted, it's not a Bradford example, but one that resonates with me in terms of being able to take a business like that was a fledgling business. We launched that in our St. Ives store, and we've now got plans to broaden that presence across more stores in the UK. And so I think that's a good example of an initiative that can help local businesses. And I was talking to our commercial director actually over breakfast this morning ahead of this session, and we had a small pause on that programme last year because of COVID. We're looking to relaunch that and give more local businesses an opportunity to participate. I gave our commercial director a real challenge around the diversity of that supplier base. Yeah, because the reality is that I don't think that diversity is properly there. And I definitely left him with some real food for thought around how we improve that representation from the communities that we as a business serve. We need to make sure that those sort of initiatives land with real impact for all communities, not just the ones that kind of end up turning up to a village hall and presenting to us. We have to be able to access all of that talent that I believe exists. And so that's a really important initiative. And then the other one I wanted to share was just around the Apprenticeship Levy. So we pay a significant amount into the Apprenticeship Levy. And I'm going to be completely honest on this one. We have nicked this idea from Asda. Roger will know this because I think he's aware of it. They've done it in Leeds. We're going to copy them. So we are looking to transfer some of our Apprenticeship Levy to pay for apprentices to train in small businesses within the local community. So giving young people the opportunity to develop new skills and small businesses the support to develop young talent that they may not otherwise be able to afford to do. So that, I think those two elements hopefully go some way to answering your question. I'm sure there's other examples, but those are definitely two tangible pieces that I'd pull out.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Miles. That's really insightful and I think really tangible and frank responses. So thank you very much. Right, I'm going to move on quite swiftly because I'm conscious of time and we seem to be slipping quite quickly behind quite early on. So I wanted to now introduce Kirsten. I already mentioned my connection back to Kirsten when Kirsten first arrived in Bradford, and we met, I think, at the World Curry Festival. So Kirsten is not only Chief Exec of Bradford Council, I think took over at a time when it was very, very challenged. I think that, she's also, I had to select because there's a long list of things that I could have picked on, but CEO of the Yorkshire Leaders Board, Chair of the Yorkshire and Humber Chief Execs Board, and is also a member of council for Bradford University, amongst many other things. Kirsten, over to you.
Thanks, Amir, and it's a real pleasure to be here with you this afternoon and also to be in the company of the other panellists, and just to say my own personal thank you to Liz and Yorkshire Water and Maz and Morrisons for everything that you've done through the pandemic, because I have to say I've spent days with Yorkshire Water colleagues when we've been looking at some of the challenges that our communities have faced in terms of access to our disruption in water supplies and the community engagement we've done. And I think I had David Potts on speed dial in the early part of the pandemic, Maz, around food bank stocks when we were getting panic buying. And I know Morrison's really got behind us in terms of all of that. And David Scott and I have spoken regularly about supermarkets being COVID secure and recently about the apprenticeship. David sent me a message to say, we've just noticed Asda is doing this, shall we do this here? Which is absolutely fantastic. And actually, Morrisons, I would say, has always had a really proud record in local purchasing. And I'm really, really pleased to hear that the diversification of that purchasing is something you've absolutely got in the forefront of your mind now. So that it's just great to spend some time with you. Also, Amir, just to hear you being so positive asset based and looking at opportunities now, because I profoundly believe that is the way we'll make progress, rather than focusing on deficits or problems. And that is not to say that we're not in a challenging circumstance. As you said, Amir, I'm Chief Executive of Bradford Council. I'm very proud to be so. I take that asset-based approach as well to everything I do. What is at the heart of my job is to try and create the best possible quality of life for the people of this district now and for the future. And the way that we understand that is about a kind of inclusive and sustainable economy, because we believe, you know, the best way to a long, happy, healthy life is actually to have sufficient income throughout your life, not to be scrabbling on the margins of poverty. And you know, when I come to look at the district from which I'm responsible, so much about it, which is brimming full of opportunity and asset, which is, I think, what you started with here. You know, we're diverse in every which way. You've pointed to the kind of the connections through to the Asian subcontinent. There are 150 languages spoken in this district. We're the youngest city in the country. A third of us are under the age of 20, and we are an entrepreneurial place. So, you know, from my point of view, I'm responsible for a place which has many people who are, you know, young, digitally savvy, they're from entrepreneurial backgrounds, and they're globally connected. What is not to like about that proposition? And indeed, that has been a really strong selling point in terms of inward investment. And apologies for this, Anthony, but, you know, at least in part, it drove PwC's decision to come and base their office here, and it's the fastest growing office in PwC's portfolio right now. And it was also, I think, instrumental, Roger, in the decision of Channel 4 to come and base itself in the Leeds City region. You know, Alex Mann said that up front when she, you know, announced the decision, and we're delighted that that is so. And of course, it's been recognised in other ways. I mean, according to recent league tables, we're the second most entrepreneurial place in the UK after Portsmouth, just in terms of business startups. You know, treat all of these indices with caution, but we'll take it absolutely as a positive kind of accolade. Barclays in recent times described us as the best place to start a high growth business, analysing 12 different domains, from kind of cost of entry to the activity, connectivity, business to business support, local authority kind of fiscal and grant support, and so on. And again, sorry, Anthony, PwC said we're the most improved city, and it's one of its most recent accounts. So, and real strengths, abiding strengths, as we've heard, around manufacturing, not just food manufacturing, but as you know, textiles, engineering, chemicals related to the water industry, Liz, you know, lots of companies related to your utility business and its presence in this district, but also an abiding presence in the financial services sector with Yorkshire Building Society here, and Provident Financial, and a significant presence of Santander, but also around construction, logistics, distribution, electronics, and digital. So some real skills. We're not a district with a prime in its economic base, and Roger and I have debated this much over the years, that we lack that prime. We are a supply chain economy, even the Leeds City region. Actually, arguably at times that gives us flexibility and resilience, but it sometimes also doesn't position us at the forefront in terms of national investment decisions in sectors. Before the pandemic, and I think we all know this, and despite all those assets, the Bradford economy was underachieving and underpowered. I mean, crudely, we'd estimate it needed to be about £4 billion kind of bigger in GVA terms than it was. If we were to reach Roger's golden mark, which is about being a net contributor to the UK economy, or actually performing at the average and then getting to be a net contributor. And I mean, it pains me to see how much kind of investment comes into Bradford, which is about failure demand and lives not well lived through unemployment benefits and so on. And that's my big driver, is to drive down that expenditure for this district and for the, you know, and for the Treasury and UK PLC. What we know about the pandemic is it's hit us hard, very hard, and you'd expect that with all the predictions around young people's unemployment. So we have the second highest level of youth unemployment currently of any city in the UK. Of course, they're disproportionately employed in retail, hospitality and leisure, and also in some of the supply chain businesses. And we know this has been a really tough time for all of those businesses. And you mentioned Regal and Mile Hor, and some of the other hospitality businesses have been amazing in getting alongside us and in community. We want to sustain that as we move forward. But it's also disrupted things like the aviation sector and its supply chain. And, you know, companies like Produmax have had to pivot rapidly and have been manufacturing parts for ventilators. I mean, I think demonstrating, Amir, what you said about our ability to flex and be resilient and respond innovatively and quickly. Our recovery plan is, as you would expect, very much focused around people in place. And I want to say thank you to Professor Zahir Irani from the University of Bradford, who led that whole process with businesses and the kind of public sector in Bradford. And very, very quickly, it's abiding concerns, employment skills, and we've just heard the conversation about the apprenticeships programme and making most use of the apprentice levy. But it's also about kind of kickstart and enabling, and the council is a broker for kickstart placements into SMEs across the district. And of course, we want to give those young people a positive exit out of that. Major piece of work around the health and social care economy, which is a real growth prospect, and both for SMEs as well as employment, access into the health and social care professions and progression pathways, really important. And this week, I kick-started a programme called Digital Makers, which is about working with 30,000 children across 38 secondary schools to give every single one of them the requisite digital skills to flourish in an increasingly digitally enabled world. And we got round the table, Raspberry Pi, Lego, Cisco, Channel 4, the BBC, the British Library, the DFE, all of whom see Bradford as an amazing test bed for providing that ubiquitous kind of digital connection for our young people and their ability to flourish. So lots of work going on in the employment skill space. Business growth, well, of course, this is something we're doing around business growth, but obviously much more I could say about that in terms of supporting businesses to access sites, startup grow-on spaces, access grants and loans, also get the kind of support they need to understand import and export activity. Major focus for us at the moment on clean growth. Council just approved the Clean Air Zone last week. That will bring £41 million into the district to invest to implement that. That should kickstart the low emission economy in our district. Again, there could be many opportunities for businesses here across a range of things, from that data collection, monitoring, and the kind of construction works that's going to be required around that. We're doing a lot of what we call modal shift to enable people to move on to more sustainable forms of transport, redirecting roads. Apologies for those for whom that inconveniences, and lots of work around the circular economy with our business community, and Liz's company is an exemplar of that. I'm delighted to be working with Yorkshire Water on the Eshalt proposition, which I think will be a real exemplar of the kind of sustainable economy. So lots to say about that. Also working hard on the offer of the city. I think one of the things, Amir, we would say is that the perception and understanding of Bradford has lagged from reality for many years. And we've been seen as a place which is difficult to do business, low skills, and low viability. And we just really systematically need to reposition people's understanding of us as a place of opportunity. And alongside that, the work on City of Culture. And then just finally, and I will stop, the whole agenda around placemaking, which you alluded to in your opening remarks. So we have the biggest pipeline of not just ambition, but programs and projects with capital funds for delivery. And you mentioned the Odeon Live, we have One City Park, we have the markets in the city centre, the city village, the Southern Gateway, which is an area 3 times the size of Canary Wharf, which we're going to create as a kind of technopolis kind of business park. The work we're doing in our leisure estate, both of our major hospitals have announced ambitions for major hospital rebuilds and potential relocations. Masses of opportunity there around that capital ambition. And I'll stop there, Amir.
That's brilliant. I mean, thank you for that. I think it's a whistle-stop tour of sort of things going on. I guess just very quickly, because I'm just, again, really conscious of time, but if I can just focus on just the last thing that you said, how do people within this audience get into a supply chain of the things that are happening? There's all these amazing things you've outlined there. And, do we see consultants coming in from outside? Do we see contractors and jobs and things coming from outside? How do people who are already here or who have got an interest in getting into that supply chain, could you say something how they might benefit from it?
No, absolutely. And I think Liz touched on it, which is we have a social value procurement policy with an explicit intention to purchase more from our local economic area, both kind of, excuse me, Bradford and the Leeds City region. And a bit like, I don't know if it was Anthony or Liz, we spend about £500 million a year in kind of procurement commissioning. And at the moment, 41% of that is spent in this district. That's around about £200 million. Now, we've set the intention for it to be at least 50%. So that's an additional 50 million, not to mention, as you know, in terms of where we're on the procurement cycle, the re-procurement of contracts. Obviously, the main sectors are social care, construction, minor work, supplies and services. We have a procurement portal, which is called yourtender.co.uk. It's free to register on that. So I'd just encourage every business to register on that. We're about to launch a kind of business support scheme around supporting businesses to be ready to tender in our marketplace, to enter the marketplace, called Go for Growth. And I'll make sure, Amir, through the course of this programme, everybody gets examples of that. I think there is something, I think a bit, as Maz said, actually, I think it might, Maz, about how you navigate into and build relationships with people within the business. My head of procurement is a guy called Ian Westlake. So again, I will give everybody his connection, but I think probably we should provide the names of all the main commissioners across the spend categories. And I think it is about developing the relationship, not selling your wares from the off, but it's about understanding the opportunities coming up, what people will be looking for, what good will look like, getting feedback when you do bid, and if you weren't successful. So there's a continuous learning. So I think, you know, that's what I say, making ourselves more accessible and intelligible, and our intentions clearer.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Right, so I'm going to move on again quite swiftly, because, as I say, time is pressing. So I basically wanted to sort of introduce Anthony Barrett from Kpmg, and it's interesting because Anthony and myself have actually met around roundtable dinners, much more lavish than this because the food was very nice, but it was all focused around how the Asian business sector can really be uplifted and how can Kpmg get involved. So actually, I would say that you know, my experience at Kpmg has been for quite some time now, has been really interested in that sector, and has really sort of, well, they put on a very fine dinner, if nothing else. So it was a really good, it's been some really good events. So Anthony's obviously a director at Kpmg, has had a 20-year career in corporate finance, and I think as a managing director, he's actually had first-hand experience of running businesses. So I think from the audience perspective, there's a really good sort of sense of where they're at and how they want to try and sort of get onto the big agenda things. So Anthony, over to you, and if you could be as tight as you can, I'd appreciate it. That'd be great.
Fear not, Amir, I'm going to get you some time back. So yeah, we'll start with Kpmg. Really excited to be here, everybody. Just a bit about Kpmg. We are an international accounting and advisory firm, a little bit like PwC that's been mentioned earlier, but we are one of the big four accountants. In terms of our capability, we deliver audits which maintain the integrity of the capital markets. We deliver tax and legal, we deliver consulting, and we deliver deals for our clients. You may know us as large listed and public sector, but we also deal in the financial services sector, so banking, insurance, asset management. But really, the heart of Kpmg is in what we call national markets, and we call Kpmg private enterprise. And we are focused on regional business, SMEs, family businesses, and how we can engage with the region. So, as Amir said, I've been working for a number of years now around the Asian business sector alongside a colleague of mine, Haroon Ahmed. And we run a number of businesses, a number of dinners, with Asian businesses, just to try and collaborate and break down some of those barriers, bring them into our offices, talk about some of the fantastic businesses that we've got on patch, and just make sure that they are plugged into our networks and some of the offerings. We're also very respectful of existing advisors. So keep your existing advisors, but collaborate with the likes of Kpmg, PwC, to make sure you're getting access to that wider thought. So just a little bit of background on myself. As Amir said, I'm a corporate financier, buying and selling businesses. And I started off my career, my first deal was the Card Factory, which is a well-known retailer. But that started from selling cars from the back of the car of the owner, Dean Hoyle. So it was a real rags to riches story, and for me, working for a big firm of accountants, I could really see the entrepreneurial spirit in that business, and I've continued to be passionate about linking in with the region's entrepreneurs to see how we can help them on that first very difficult part of how do you scale up your business. So I think that's enough about Kpmg and me. Amir?
Brilliant, thank you. Well, I mean, I guess just one thing I did want to just ask, I guess, in terms of this audience that we have here and the small SMEs, I mean, why would they be relevant to you as a, you know, normally we associate Kpmg with the big corporates and sort of working on the big contracts, but why would, say, this region or smaller businesses, why would you be focusing on that?
Yeah, well, it's very clear to me. 10 years ago, you would say that our clients were the big PLCs in the region, but the way the market's moved, it's moved towards entrepreneurs. We are seeing businesses being formed, raising more money, and being sold for significant amounts before they even need an audit. And without going into detail, that's 10 million of turnover. So if we're not careful, we need to be relevant to those fast-growing entrepreneurs. And we see a city like Bradford, that's one of the youngest cities that's already been mentioned in the country, and got that entrepreneurial spirit. So we need to find these businesses and help them be the best that they can be.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. That's really helpful. So moving on, Roger. So I mean, my association with Roger goes back to when I joined the LEP board, and I remember even when I went for the interview for that, and it was really stressed to me how Roger saw the importance of the Asian business community and the SME business community and sort of that smaller operator, how important that was. And Roger's, you'll probably talk about himself, I'm sure, about productivity and sort of the gap and the challenges around that. And I think that from my perspective, it's been a really powerful sort of journey of enlightenment. And that's really been part of how we've transitioned, has been through the work that I've been doing with Roger. So Roger OBE is chair of the LEP, and I'll let Roger talk about that. Also chair of the Northern Powerhouse LEPs, all the LEPs of the Northern Powerhouse, and has got a long history with the other team at PwC and turning around businesses. And I think that's particularly interesting given the opportunities that I think a lot of businesses are in now, where they've got to respond to COVID, they've got to respond to all the other challenges that they're being faced with. And given your experience, I think that could be really, really interesting. So Roger, over to you.
Thank you, Amir, and good afternoon, everybody. And the one thing I'm not going to do is bore myself, let alone everybody else, about my 4 decades and counting. But I think the important thing was maybe just a little bit of background. Not only have we got 3 alumni from the University of Leeds on the call, we've got at least 3 chartered accountants, which is rather interesting. Although I started life as a sponsored undergraduate from British Steel, and I'm actually a metallurgist by first degree. So whilst being privileged to be an alumnus of the University of Leeds, I'm also privileged to be an honorary graduate of the University of Huddersfield. I specialised for just shy of 4 decades in business recovery turnaround, and where appropriate, insolvency, to save businesses, not just to put them to the metaphorical corporate sword. Working through the 80s, 90s and into the 2000s, I've probably not participated in, but witnessed the deindustrialisation of the North, and particularly our part of the world. And it's not so long ago, I remember, that 10 Market Street, Bradford, the Barclays branch on 10 Market Street, Bradford, was not only the most profitable branch of the bank in the UK, but actually globally. Such is the might of the economic activities that were undertaken from the great city of Bradford. And I would say to everybody in Bradford, despite all of the challenges and all of the difficulties, we are a region that's actually full of opportunity, as Kirsten's exemplified. And rather than look down, look up. Look up and see our heritage, and actually how do we make that heritage work for all our communities now and going forward. Along my journey in business recovery, I was privileged to be seconded to the Cabinet Office, where working directly with the then Cabinet Secretary, now Lord O'Donnell, was the Director of Strategic Finance and Operations. And it was quite an interesting time to be there, 2007, where everything seemed to be going rather well, and to return back to PwC, as it had become, in 2009, where everything had gone rather badly wrong, but not down to me, I hasten to add. But that gave me a chance to think about what has happened to the North. I should also say, Maz, I was absolutely privileged as a non-civil servant operating in the top 200 of the civil service to be asked by their decision, the staff of the Cabinet Office, right at the heart of government, to be their BAME representative on the Cabinet Office board. So that was a double plus for me as an outsider from the North, and from a grammar school rather than anything else, to be in such a place. But I got started thinking about what the hell's happened, what's gone on, and how do we change that direction of travel? And in that, I hasten to add, this isn't about the North asking for favouritism. This is the North asking for fairness, asking to give us the tools so that the great that we put in Great Britain in our industrial past, we will do again. There's no doubt we'll do it because we've evidence that we have, rather than perhaps trying to prove a point. So to turning to the LEP, Leeds City Region LEP, which includes not only the great cities of Leeds and Bradford, but Wakefield, Kirklees, Calderdale, York, etc. What's its purpose? What's its role? It's a big business-led partnership, but a capital P partnership between the private and the public sector. I think we all recognise that the private sector does some things really, really well. The public sector does some things that really, really well, but together we can make a virtue of extraordinary becoming the new norm. And so what have we been doing? We were the architects of what was the strategic economic plan for the wider region. So it's about strategy. It's about bidding for money. I'm delighted, NEC, Bradford, Regal Foods, if I remember rightly, are some of the businesses that have had support. It's not the LEP's money, it's our money, it's taxpayers' money, but we deploy it. So bidding and then deploying, and as Kirsten knows, getting building fund will help support one city park and the village, etc. And then the third bit is to actually oversee and ensure that delivery takes place to that strategy around boosting productivity. We talked about inclusivity, that green agenda, tackling the climate emergency, but importantly, creating not only a 21st century physical connectivity infrastructure, but the digital side of it too. And I'm reminded at this point of the words of Henry Ford. It's not about you can have it in any colour but black, but he said that vision without execution is just an hallucination. Now, I know I've used this before, but this is at the heart of it. This isn't about having a plan and then having another plan and then having another plan. This is about getting on and doing it. And what does that look like to date? To date, we've deployed together with through the combined authority with districts like Bradford and others, we've deployed in excess of £1 billion of public money on a whole variety of things. And I'm not going to catalogue them. The important thing is we've leveraged at least, and in more cases it's almost double digits, but at least £4 for every pound the taxpayer has put in. And you'll probably find that when we actually look at the impact to date, this is pre-pandemic, I hasten to add, that probably for every pound the taxpayers put in, across the range of things that we've invested in, we've probably double digit the economic uplift. Such to the point where pre-pandemic, if you looked at the annual average growth of the wider city region, I know there's variations and differences, we probably were tracking significantly ahead than the national average. So we were doing something that was making a difference, but perhaps not as much as we need to. I should also add that I was very privileged to be invited to be one of the judges for the Northern Asian Power List, which was launched late last year. And I pay tribute to Sharon Jandu and others for firing that up. And it's important as well, if we've got to remember as a country that something like 6% of the population or thereabouts is from some sort of Asian origin, but actually they can contribute at least double that in percentage terms to economic growth, economic activity. So actually this is kind of important. It's not out of selfishness, it's about actually necessity. Recently, in fact, on Monday, I think it was it Tuesday? I can't remember which day of the week it was now. It was actually Wednesday when I think about it. It was Wednesday. The UK Board of Trade launched their latest report, Global Britain Local Jobs. And I mentioned productivity, and in that, two things struck me. First of all, that the ONS has said that businesses that export are usually at least a fifth more productive. Well, if productivity is a problem for us, then let's think about exporting. How do we encourage businesses in this region that perhaps have never done it before, or alternatively think about some new markets? And I think probably mostly over the last decade, we've tended as a region, and probably as a wider north, we've tended always to look east of where we are, east into Europe, east into the Middle East, to Asia and beyond. But maybe it's time to also look a bit west to perhaps our biggest market potentially in time, the US, but also south to something called CPTPP, or what's called the Comprehensive Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. And why I raise this is, who'd have thought that within a generation, the OECD are predicting that Mexico will be the 10th largest economy in the world? Just a thought, just to put something out there. So it is about actually giving the opportunity for all businesses to attract public money where it's appropriate in particular sectors where we see extraordinary growth, but also not just money, but support, as we've tried to throughout the pandemic. And such has been my desire to ensure that Leeds City region is not just about Leeds and other places, but it's actually all of the city region, is why Amir, when we met and we were looking to recruit, I wanted to invite you to join the LET board. Why, on behalf of all of the vice chancellors across the city region, the 9 universities, Shirley Congdon, the VC of Bradford is now on the LET board, and also Cameron Rashid in terms of his social entrepreneurship, social inclusivity is also on the board. So I've made those steps to create that cohesion. What we need to do is to ensure that all of the benefits of the investments are felt everywhere. And importantly, going back to that report that I mentioned, Global Britain Local Jobs, one of the things that it says is that the UK, and this should be true for us, we need to ride, and this is, as it's quoted in the report, ride the digital and green wave. A value proposition that suggests that by 2030, it should be worth at least £170 billion of additional activity to this country. So the question for me is, how many of those enterprising young men and women and other businesses that are out there listening today perhaps could be thinking about how do we get on the back of that? So look up, not down. It's a land of opportunity, literally. We need to be execution focused. We need to be delivery, and delivery. And there's plenty of help available. And I'll finish perhaps, and I know Kirsten have heard me say this before, but it really is at the heart of my creed is that the best way to predict that future for Bradford, for Leeds City region, and for the North as a whole is to go out and create it. And this is why events like today I'm so happy to participate in. It's delightful to hear about Morrison's. It's fantastic to hear that actually 2 of them, 4 national food retailers are headquartered in our region. it's fantastic to have a partner like Yorkshire Water in its broader sense. I'm glad you've got your anaerobic digestion working. I remember as a young auditor, Liz, and you've heard this story, I wasn't even qualified when Yorkshire Water decided to create something called Yorkshire Bounty, and that was not a good way of processing some of their active, and put bags into Morrison's actually, Naz, and unfortunately the bags burst a bit and I think caused a bit of a problem. But anyway, that's another story. So things have obviously massively improved. But look, I genuinely, but I want to use, people like you, Amir, and people like Cameron and others, that, however hard I try to understand and be in the shoes of the cultural differences, of which I'm hugely respectful, I'm not going to try and kid anybody. What I need is you to help me and the people on this call as we go down this journey, because I do think Bradford in UK PLC is one of the untapped opportunities, and it is, and I agree with Kirsten, brimming with talent. We need to do, people like me, is to make sure to ensure people understand that the one-off cost of a station on Northern Powerhouse Rail in Bradford is a really cheap deal. Yes, it may be a big number, but it's a really cheap deal for decades to come. So I think probably for me to stop there and just say that I am a very, very ambitious for Bradford and excited by the promise it has.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Roger. That was really comprehensive, really good to get that insight. So, I mean, it's been phenomenal. I mean, I just have to point out that, this is the first time we've ever held something like this, and we didn't actually know how many people we were going to get. We didn't know what the format was going to be, and actually, I mean, we've had around 130 people, between 130 and 140 people on this call, which is incredible. It's fantastic. We have had loads of questions, and I'm conscious we've got 15 minutes left, and I want to talk about the program at the end as well. So I'm going to now hand over to Yasmin, and Yasmin's going to sort of try to, I hope, condense some of the questions into a few things, and then if panelists can be really brief with answers, then we'll hopefully try and get through as many as possible. So Yasmin, over to you.
Right, okay, thank you very much, everyone. And Amra's right, we've had lots of questions buzzing through the Q&A. I've tried to collate many of them together because some of them really overlap in terms of what they're asking. So the first batch of questions are regarding, more details that panelists might be able to provide regarding information that you're providing, advice that your companies are providing, practical support, financial support. I mean, where people are still struggling with trying to navigate through the deluge of the deluge of information, or the scarcity of information, in order to practically access some of the opportunities that you've been discussing. So you've already mentioned some of this already, but I don't know if any of you would like to say more about how participants can find out more about the opportunities that you're offering. So, Maz, can I pass that? Oh, sorry, I've seen Liz's hand. Liz, do you want to go for it? Yeah, go for it, as you wish.
I'd say, sorry, Maz. Yeah, I think that's an excellent observation there. And I said that Yorkshire Water is working hard at the moment. I would be very happy, maybe through, through this network, to put details out about, we talked about accessibility and the ability to get into Yorkshire Water. We're still working on that, but I'd be very happy to publish that through this mechanism, or take any advice from the people who are dialing into this or other panelists about how best to contact you, to reach out to you, to let you know how best to get in to Yorkshire Water. So I'll take that as an action. A further one may be actually, in a future one of these, Amir, is actually to come and say, this is how you do it as well. Maybe follow up with something a bit more productive.
Definitely, thank you.
Perhaps I could follow on from Liz to say it is almost mission impossible to make sure everybody knows where everything is. That doesn't mean to say that's a defeatist remark, quite the contrary. Having people like you on the board and having people like Cameron and Shirley are go-to in the locality. Secondly, anything to do with availability of public support is on the LEP and WICA websites. The Business Growth Service, of which there are growth managers in every of the districts, and one embedded in Kirsten's operation as well elsewhere. The Leeds telephone number is 3481818. It has a certain resonance that you might recognise, and failing which, anybody who knows me, not that I want to have 1 million emails a day, I've got 500,000 at the moment. Anybody knows me is if they contact me, I will make sure those connections are made. But there is and it is, as with all these things, there are challenges to navigate it, but we try to make it as simple as possible. And if I think of the during the course of the pandemic, Leeds City Region has a business stock of about 130,000, and working in partnership with our local authority colleagues, Kirsten and others, we have enabled 54,000 of those businesses, so nudging towards half, get access to not only grants, but probably a further quantum on top, access to some of the available loan funding to sustain those businesses. And finally, and very recently, even supported some significant businesses access the Bank of England CCFF facilities, which ain't that easy. So I think we've got a record of success, but what there isn't, and I'm confident we will be able to help and support, but I'm not at all, and hopefully it doesn't come across as any scintilla of complacency on my part, because this is a big challenge as we come out of the pandemic and we rescue what we have. But importantly, and I think this is the exciting bit for me, we reimagine the city region's economy and the economy of Bradford, and at the same time try and build in some, I call it shock absorber, but the fancy R bit is resilience into it, so that we can perhaps cushion particularly badly affected communities from things like this going forward.
Brilliant, thank you.
I mean, just as a build on everything that Liz and Roger have said, I'd say one very quick point. I think we need to also be very clear around the food safety standards, clearer in an organisation like Morrison, clearer on food safety standards, quality standards that are going to be expected of organisations that would want to come into Morrison's, because that then avoids any wasted time or energy, and everyone's really, really clear. And I think then the final challenge I'd take away for our organisation is how do we innovate and how do we think a bit more creatively around the channels we use to communicate as well. We can definitely use this group, but I'm conscious that yes, there's 100 odd attendees here, but there's a wealth of talent that we may miss, and so I'm conscious that we have to think a bit more creatively around those channels.
So Amir, do you want me just to briefly mention, I mean, the one-stop shop for Bradford businesses is to go to Invest in Bradford, and its website, I'm just looking at it now, covers coronavirus support, business support to help start and grow, developments, opportunities no savvy investor or developer can choose to ignore, property, commercial, resources, living and events. And it's advertising at the moment the Northern Max Accelerator, the growth programme for ambitious digital and tech startups in Bradford. So I think go to that website because it's got all the up-to-date information. Other than that, I would say register on yourtender.gov.uk, which is actually a kind of governmental procurement portal, and get to know Ian Westlake at bradford.gov.uk. And as Roger says, in extremis, or if you're getting real blockages, email me.
Brilliant, thank you. Yasmin, I think we've probably got time for one more, I think.
Okay, well, it's really hard to...
questions that we've had. But
it's really hard to kind of select one, so my apologies for colleagues whose questions I'm not able to share. But, just one question regarding tech companies. Can we do more to encourage some of the big tech companies to have satellite bases in the region in order to help with our digital developments? I don't know if any of the panelists can say anything more about tech companies and hubs that are possible in our Leeds City region, Bradford.
I wonder if Roger should take that, because we've had actually pretty significant success in terms of inward investment from tech companies in the last 5 years, haven't we, Roger?
Let me start, and I know time is short, but Leeds City region is a microcosm of the whole UK, and that should be key to our vitality, that variety, rather than actually something that's secondary. The fact we don't yet and I say yet, have OEMs like Hitachi or Jaguar Land Rover or the like, it doesn't mean that we don't make everything else that they really need. So we are part of that supply chain and Producer City Bradford, if I remember rightly, Kirsten. Together, we managed to move the dial on. In 2013, after London, we were the 13th most attractive city region for inward investment, either within the UK or from overseas. 1920, prior to the pandemic, we moved the dial on as externally attested to third, not just third after London, third in absolute terms. So we've done a lot, and you've already highlighted examples of Channel 4, Burberry, The Zun, Reed Smith, Link Asset Services, not least of which the National Infrastructure Bank. And we have done a lot, but there's still a lot more we can do, and a lot we can do in terms of new sectors to the region. That's why I was delighted recently that together with the University of Leeds, has secured central funding to begin to develop a space cluster. And I was on a call recently with the Satellite Applications Catapult about how do we get into that space. There's the space of quantum computing and actually what's called quantum key distribution, which is security. There's a whole range of things that we're now set up to. And the fact we have the highest concentration of universities and FE colleges outside of London South East is another one of our massive assets. So we have the talent, we have the volumes of people, we need to create ever more opportunities so that we create our own self-sustaining successful ecosystem, and as a consequence drive up living standards, because that is the prize. The economic growth is merely the enabler to the real prize, which is everybody having a reasonably good quality, if not an enhanced quality of life.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. It's now 25 minutes past, so I think we're going to have to sort of try and just move on to the next part. But I just hope that from the conversations and the discussions that have taken place, that you get the sense around the appetite that there is within not just these businesses that are here today, but the ones that I know and interact with. You know, there's a really massive appetite to interact and engage in places, you know, in communities and in smaller businesses, and to really try and uplift and create those opportunities. So I hope if that's something that people can take away from there, that it begins to start the journey around how they see their future. I think one of the statistics that I found quite surprising when I was in one of the board meetings a couple of weeks ago was that the economy size of £70 billion almost thereabouts, of that, the food sector makes up just 2.2% of what all that constitutes. So when I think about the Asian business community and I see the things that we're involved in, well, we're involved in a lot of activity, but it's not necessarily the activity that is producing the most input and the most impact. So when you're in business and when you're looking at starting businesses, or you're looking at diversifying or adjusting, and you can see where the trajectories are going, then there's an opportunity to align these things so that they align with where the trajectories are going. And I think that's the basis for the Asian Business Coaching Program that I'm looking to establish with the help of Bradford Council and of the LEP. I'll just bring up the slide once more so that it's visible. But essentially what we're looking to try and do is to take people who are participating in this on the journey that really I've been on, this one around awareness of what's going on, understanding of how to create a proposition within each of those businesses that are participating that can respond to this both from a social, a technical, ethical, a sustainability perspective. And one of the things that I think is really important is that businesses know what their ask is. It's very easy to say, well, I need a grant or I need money, but actually that on its own isn't enough. There has to be a stronger sense of where it's going with that grant or with that support. And I think that the opportunities that are being presented through technology, through funding, and through the sort of ecosystems that not only this region has, but other regions have them as well, it's about tapping into those. And when you get into that realm, I think it's then about knowing how to position your offer, position your proposition, presenting that in a way that people such as Liz and Maz and Kpmg can look at and say, this is an organization that if we engage and support with, it will achieve exponential outcomes and benefits beyond just this one thing. So how do we try to really define those propositions? And then for us, it's about us being able to look at productivity. And I mean, it's a word that is used a lot, but essentially it means how do you make more with less resources and in less time? And if that's the way that we have to go in order to become competitive, well, we've got to be able to look at automation and technology and the adoption of that. And as another fellow board member, Rashik Palmer from IBM, says, you know, if you don't become digital, you will become digitized. And so it's about either you take it on or it will be done to you. And we can see the disruption and the displacement that's happening within the business world. And I think that for us, it's about us not falling victim to that. So the idea is to take a 12-week program, to take a cohort of businesses through it. We do want to film this and create a vlog series out of it, not just for entertainment, but really for it to help inform the policymakers and people in councils and people in big businesses around some of the requirements that organizations in this sector have. And also to help highlight to other people who are in business or starting businesses that this is a good way for them to start positioning their propositions. So it's now 16:30. I'm hoping that we can finish absolutely on time. So that only really leaves me to thank our panelists profusely for taking part in this. It's incredibly valuable. And I also want to really thank everybody that has attended today, everybody that shared it, everybody that's passed it on, everybody that has supported me in the things that I do, and everybody in my team. And I would also just say that this recording will be made available, so it is something that people can look at, and we'll put that out as soon as we can.
Amber, can I just make one quick comment? You know, we've had so many questions, and we've had a flurry of questions that have just come through in the last 10 minutes. You know, we're really apologetic, really sorry that we haven't managed to fit in all of those questions and get those questions answered. But hopefully next time, and hopefully there's been some contacts given, some telephone numbers and emails and websites that have been given by the panelists that actually provide an opportunity to progress those queries. But
Yasmin, can I make a quick offer, which is maybe Roger and I and Amir might actually seek to answer more of the questions and just send that out afterwards as part of the wrap up from it, along with all the contacts we discussed. Because I mean, I've had a look at, there's some really important questions we haven't been able to get to.
Yeah.
And certainly if we can get them into themes, that I think the important thing is about making sure people feel confident that actually this isn't just a sales pitch with no substance, actually quite the contrary. There was one question that struck me is, well, actually, how many businesses have actually had support from the LEP? Well, I'm sure we can work that out, and we should be able to share that. And what sorts of businesses. But I think, if I may say, you make a really powerful point, Amir, about the nature of the economy we want to create rather than expand from the present base. And that's where the whole innovation, entrepreneurship activity in our economic recovery strategy more broadly is key. And I know how entrepreneurial Asian friends and businesses are, and we want to try and engender more of that and support more of that.
Brilliant.
I think that offer by Kirsten and, you know, echoed by Richard and yourself, I think that would be really helpful in responding to participants' views. So thanks very much, guys. Thanks.
I've got to go, sorry about that, but thank you very much, Amir. It's been great.
Thank you very much, everybody. I hope it has been useful, and I hope it's productive, and I hope we can carry it on. So guys, thank you very much. And if you do want to apply for the Asian, just drop me an email, as I said at the beginning, just drop me an email and I'll start the process from there. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks.
Bye.